Power Hour with John Lee.
Papa Doc Duvalier. Who's that dude? Well, the doc would indicate that he's a doctor, which he was. He was a country doctor. But he studied in America. He was good. And he came back from America with penicillin. He just brought it back. And the locals had all this had this terrible disease that deformed the legs. And he went from town to town curing people. And so people, because they say that Haiti, which is where Papa Doc Duvalier was from and where he became the dictator, Haiti is 70% Catholic, 30% Protestant, and 100% Voodoo. So they fully believe in Voodoo. Voodoo rules their lives in Haiti. And so when he was healing people, they didn't think, oh, it's penicillin. They thought this guy's got magical powers. And that's what ascended him in the public consciousness. And it's a place of tremendous pride as well, Haiti, because it was the first slave colony in the world to achieve its own freedom. And they did it by force, by kicking the French out of Haiti. So the first major empire in the world to get their ass kicked off an island was the French. And Papa Doc Duvalier ascended to the throne. He became the president, but then he made himself president for life. You're only supposed to have one term in Haiti. He changed that in his first term, and then in his second term, he made himself president for life. He claimed that he was indestructible, and nobody couldn't be killed. And the reason I call him a puppet president is because he was completely financed by the Americans, because Fidel Castro took control of Cuba and he's a communist. So Haiti's a Caribbean island as well. So, well, it's not an island, it's half an island. They share it with the Dominican Republic. So he goes to America and he says, look, I'm anti-communist, but I might not be tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? So they start funding him and giving him weapons, and he creates the Tom Tom Macoute, which is like the bogeymen in voodoo mythology. And these are just guys going around quite casually dressed, but with guns. And Papa Doc Duvalier is a little fella. You wouldn't think anything of him if you saw him in the street. And he carried around a submachine gun. He's like royal, almost. He's like his royal submachine gun that he carried around with him. It's a rough place, but I mean, these guys are armed to the teeth, doing horrible things, killing people. I'm putting it politely when I say killing people, and leaving the bodies in trees as a warning to everybody. And if you try to get somebody down from the tree, they'd shoot you for trying to pull the body out of the tree. So crazy stuff. And this guy was totally financed by the states, and he also hated the Americans because the Americans invaded Haiti at some point in the 20th century before all this and occupied it as well. So it's a complicated story, that. But they certainly created the beast. The Americans saw that it was politically beneficial for them to have an anti-communist black leader in the Caribbean, and so they chose Papa Doc Duvalier. But they financed him and created a voodoo nightmare in Haiti, which is one of the most brutal dictatorships of the 20th century for its scale, and it became hereditary. He passed the torch to his son, who became known as Baby Doc Duvalier, who did exactly the same thing. So we'll throw the blame there at the French and the Americans. So the Americans are getting quite a lot of blame, but so they should, if that's what they've done. Kim Jong-un. So I'm just going to call them all Kim, right? Because they are all called Kim, but it's hard to remember all the different Kims. I'm talking about the not the population. I'm talking about the family. So there are three. The one that is in power now, the one you see on television now, if you don't know, is the grandson of the original, right? So the original Kim, he's a warlord. Another one of these hard cases that rises to power. And he did so by kicking the Japanese out of Korea. And then he was backed by the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union gave him forces and gave him arms and support and all that, and he started attacking the South Koreans, because there's always been that kind of north-south divide. They weren't two different countries, but they were divided, like Vietnam. And he pushed the South Koreans down into the corner. The Americans thought, all right, these communists are going to take over the country of Korea, so we'll get involved. So they came in from the bottom, and they started attacking the north, that side of the Civil War, and they carpet bombed the country, and they killed nearly 2 million people. That's a lot. Is that a genocide? I would say 2 million people qualifies as a genocide. They went in there and bombed the country so badly, North Korea, what we know as North Korea now, the Americans bombed it so badly that they killed nearly 2 million people. Now, would that have been necessary if the Russians hadn't have gotten involved in the first place? Or if the Japanese hadn't invaded? I'm not just throwing all this on the Americans. I'm talking about like the Game of Thrones way that things are put together in the world. So the Russians get involved in Korea. And then the Americans, obviously, they get involved again to fight, as part of the Cold War. And so it's the Korean people who end up suffering, and they're still suffering now. And I will give some credit to the Americans, because if you look at Berlin and you look at Korea as examples, these are territories shared by the Americans and the Russians. So Berlin was divided, and it was East Germany and West Germany, and the Russian part, East Germany, was horrible. One of the worst places in the world you could live, where East Germany was just a European country. And the same in Korea. South Korea is, completely consumerist society, but free, and a lot wealthier and happier, and actually taller. The people of North Korea are significantly shorter than the people of South Korea, because the entire generation of malnourished people didn't grow. And as well, apart from all this, another extenuating circumstance is that when the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, fell, that destroyed the Korean Empire as well, and that's why North Korea became so poor in the 90s, because the Russian Empire collapsed at the end of the 80s. And you can see the domino effect of this, and the Cold War, and the domino effect of it all over the world. And North Korea was one of the big victims of it. Their economy completely collapsed and created an entire generation of people, a lot of blind people, a lot of really short people, malnourished from birth. So what's the sequence, right? The first Kim, he's a warlord, and he's well respected. He's tremendously charismatic, good-looking guy as well, very tall in his environment, and powerful, big guy, and a proper war hero. So he becomes the president, and then he becomes the president for life, becomes a dictator. But he was really like a cult leader. All these are. The Turkmenbashi runs his country like a cult. They're all in it, and they all love Turkmenbashi. He's got his pictures everywhere. Papa Doc Duvalier, it's a voodoo cult, and he was the god of it all. And Kim Jong-un, is now a cult leader. And he's the one that's in power now. So the grandfather, he's in power for years and years. Finally gives it away when he dies, when he's 83. But the son, he's not a war hero. He wasn't even born in Korea. He was born in Siberia. While his father was in exile because he was a warlord, but the son wasn't born in Korea. And so he didn't have that mythology. He wasn't a war hero, and he didn't look like one either. He looked the opposite of impressive. We can put it like that. Nothing like the father. But he was in government for about 15 years before he took over. But they'd elevated, and he personally, the son, was in charge of entertainment, which is basically propaganda. And he created this whole mythology around his father as being like a heavenly being. You know, I don't know what they call it in Korean, maybe an angel or some kind of demigod, I don't know. But he was elevated to that status and made president for eternity. So he will always be the president. There are other titles you can have, but you can't be the president. The original Kim, he's the president forever. But the son needed to make up some bullshit to make up for the reality that he's just a little dweeb. So he said, oh yeah, well, I was born on this mystical mountain in Korea. It's like their Mount Sinai. And when I was born, a star appeared, a new star appeared, right? And 2 rainbows. I mean, that's clearly bullshit. But people believed it because they were already brainwashed by the first Kim and his regime, and the second Kim, who was in charge of bullshit. And so he created this mythology around himself, absolute, Disney book lies about his birth. And he was able to carry that on until his death a few years ago when his son took over. And what his son's done, quite cleverly, is to put some weight on, right? So he's made himself a bit chubby, and he's styled his hair a certain way, and he smiles a lot, and he's basically doing an impression of his grandfather. So people in Korea are so brainwashed now, they're actually starting to believe that he's not the grandson, he's the reincarnation. And he's carefully cultivating that idea. And then I think in a couple of years he's going to kind of admit it and go, all right, I am the reincarnation. And they'll all go on, the North Koreans will all go crazy and say, we knew it, it was prophesied and all that. And then he'll be elevated to the same godlike status. So they seem to be stuck with that family in North Korea. And this one's clever. The new one's clever. He's not stupid. Again, educated in Switzerland. Not an idiot. Not at all. So I think he's dangerous. And who am I going to blame for that? Well, I'm just blaming empires. I'm blaming the general Game of Thrones, but Russia, really.